sergeant second class. Here, he was assigned to the 29th Fighter Interceptor Squadron. Upon taking a closer look at Patricia's life and tendencies, they soon grew worried because, although the couple had discussed the idea of getting married, Patricia was hardly the type to elope. She was a diligent student and had high school classes to attend the next day. She also had dreams of going to college once she finished high school. In addition to this, the couple was known to adhere to Patricia's curfew and were not expected to stay out late. Dwayne was also well accepted by Patricia's family, who considered him to be part of the family, so all in all, the couple had no reasons to disappear voluntarily. That same night, 2 women and 2 airmen drove past a man lying on the ground between a car and a tree. They did not think much of the sight and just assumed that the man was too inebriated to drive and had simply passed out on the ground beside his car. Had they stopped and checked on the man, they would have discovered that the man was in fact deceased. The next morning, on the 3rd of January 1956, 3 young boys were taking a walk in the Great Falls area, discovering the remains of 18-year-old Lloyd Dwayne Vogel. His remains were positioned such that half his body was under his car, with the other half visible outside. Dwayne had his wrists tied behind his back with his own belt, and he had been shot through the skull. The car's ignition switch was still turned on, and the headlights were turned on. A coronial inquest recommended an autopsy be done on Dwayne's remains, and while investigators knew he was shot, they were unable to recover the bullet. Investigators were still trying to recover the bullet in hopes that it would give them contextual clues about the perpetrator. During the autopsy, it was discovered that Dwayne had likely been alive for hours after he was shot. A day later, on the 5th of January 1956, the remains of Patricia Kalitsky were recovered from a rocky ravine about 8 miles from where Dwayne's remains were found. She was found fully clothed, and her remains were at the edge of a 20-foot embankment just off of a highway around 6 miles northwest of central Montana. Both robbery and sexual assault were initially ruled out as motives, since an expensive camera was found in Dwayne's car, in addition to a $5 bill that was found in his wallet. There were no signs indicating that Patricia had been sexually assaulted when her remains were first examined. However, during her autopsy, it was discovered that she had likely been sexually assaulted. News articles that reported on the crime only mentioned this in passing, possibly since discussing the topic was not socially acceptable at the time. Although technology did not exist to analyze DNA evidence at the time, coroners still collected a vaginal swab, which they stored carefully for decades to come. They also found several wounds caused by blunt force trauma, indicating that a struggle had likely ensued between Patricia and the killer. That same day, investigators questioned a possible suspect in relation to the killings, which they described as Chinese-style executions. There is no doubt that this term would not be used today, but at the time, it was far from being socially unacceptable. The personal details of this potential suspect were never released, but it was stated that he was an airman who worked with Dwayne. Just a few days prior to the killings, Patricia's mother had a conversation with Dwayne because he seemed visibly upset. She had asked him what was bothering him, to which he responded, "I've got the blues and just can't shake them," before going on to say that he had had an argument with a friend. This suspect was eventually ruled out. In November of 1989, investigators decided to look for the bullet in a tree nearby. In an interview with the Associated Press, Cascade County Sheriff Barry McLody stated, "The tree has always been of major interest to law enforcement officers because that's where he was killed, right at the tree." The recovery of the bullet used to kill Dwayne would allow investigators to identify the caliber of the weapon used to shoot and determine if the bullet is potentially linked to any firearm confiscated in other incidents over the years. Sergeant Dick Duncan stated in the same interview that previous attempts to x-ray the tree were unsuccessful due to the size and density of its bark. The tree was around 80 feet tall, and its trunk was around 4.5 feet in diameter. Investigators planned to shave around 33 growth rings off its